Hello BookTube, my name is Kate and this is my channel Chapter Kate. Today I'm going to be doing the MONSTERATHON tag. This tag is specifically created to recommend books for the MONSTERATHON. First things first, this is not a TBR video. These are specifically books that you've already read that you're recommending to other people to fill those MONSTERATHON, readathon prompts. For those that don't know, I'm hosting a month-long readathon in the month of September, and it's all about reading monster books. There are 3 teams, the Beasts, the Haunts, and the Conspiracies, and they're awesome. So we're just gonna jump right into the tag because I don't want this video to get like too long. So first things first, classic creepers. This is a book with a classic horror monster. This doesn't have to be a classic book and this doesn't have to be a horror book. It just has to be a book that contains a classic horror monster. So it can be anything like zombie, ghost, like Frankenstein, werewolves, just classic monsters. And for this one I actually am going to be recommending a classic, so breaking my own little recommendation there, but Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. If you haven't read Frankenstein, I don't know what to tell you. Most people know about Frankenstein. There's this guy, Dr. Frankenstein, starts playing with life and trying to reanimate the dead. He creates this monster pieced together of a lot of different corpse parts, and the monster comes back to life and he treats him like a monster. So the monster, even though he's really intelligent, starts to become more and more monstrous. When I read this in high school, I actually liked it a lot more than when I read it recently. I will say it still is really a good book. My only qualm with it is that it's a person on a boat telling Dr. Frankenstein's story, and then within that story the monster is telling their story at one part, and it's a lot sometimes, but overall I enjoyed it. Where do I put my books? Number 2 is What Big Eyes You Have. And this is read a book that's over 400 pages. Now, just because a book is 400 pages or more doesn't mean that it's super dense. So for this one I'm going to be saying Nevermore, The Trials of Morgan Crow by Jessica Townsend. Morgan Crow is a chick in a town where everyone pretty much blames everything on her. She's cursed. She's supposed to die on a certain day. They blame anything bad luck on her, so she doesn't really feel loved by her family at all. When the day comes that she's supposed to die, she's thrust into this other world and put through all these trials to try to see if she's, gonna make it in that world and if she's going to be inducted into the Wondrous Society. The Wondrous Society is basically like a club of elites. They all have some sort of knack that makes them special. And she spends most of the book convinced that she's probably not that special. I just finished reading this and I cannot wait to read the sequel. The next prompt is Chimera. And this is one of the prompts that doesn't really have to have monsters in it for a book to qualify. And this is read a book that could be classified under multiple genres. For this one I'm going to be recommending Dune by Frank Herbert. I recently finished this book. It is a classic science fiction novel. I say classic, but it's not like that old. This book was published in the 60s. This book follows Paul, who is the son of a duke. Paul and his family moved to a planet called Arrakis, where water is scarce? Whatever. There's a lot of political things that you would often see in epic fantasy, but it is a science fiction novel. There's also magic, which you would usually find in fantasy as well. So this, to me, reads like an epic fantasy, but it's classified, at least in my personal library and also in bookstores and things like that, it's usually classified under science fiction. I will say it's pretty dense. I think this one got a 4 stars for me because of the writing. It's older style writing, so it's a little bit tougher to get through, but the story itself was really interesting to me. I think I liked it a lot because it reminded me of Star Wars, and also to me I feel like a lot of Star Wars books would classify under this prompt as well, because just like Dune, they are science fiction, but they have a lot of fantasy elements to them. The next prompt is The Real Monsters, and this is read a book featuring a monstrous human. For this one I'm going to say Sadie. In this book, Sadie runs away in search of her little sister's killer. She's pretty convinced that she knows who it is, but for me, when I was reading the book, I was not convinced at the beginning of it. As time goes on, you become a little bit more questioning about things. This book is told in a podcast format. It goes between the podcast itself and Sadie's perspective. But I found it really interesting and I finished it really quickly, like in a day. The next prompt is Unsightly, and this is read a graphic novel, comic book, picture book, manga, some book with pictures that features a monster. I have so many that I could have chosen for this, but we're going to go with The Gigantic Beard That Was Evil by Stephen Collins. This book takes place in a place where everyone does everything the same way every day. There's a lot of order to things. The main character has one hair on his chin, and that is all. No more, no less. One hair on his chin. And then one day his beard starts growing out of control. No matter how much he trims it, it grows more and more and more. And the entire town is disrupted by this. So in this book, the monster is a beard, but it's It counts. The next one is Sacrifice, and this is read a book that you've seen in someone's unhaul video. For this one, I'm going to go with Children of Blood and Bone. I've seen this in several unhaul videos. I don't have my copy right now because I gave it to my friend, so I'm going to buy myself a new one because I wanted her to keep it and to have it because I thought it was something that she would enjoy, and it totally is. She's loving it. I was right because... But in Children of Blood and Bone, Zaylee, the main character, is trying to restore magic. That is the simplest way to put it. It's very much influenced by Avatar: The Last Airbender, but there are very distinct differences as well. I loved all of the characters. I loved the magic system. It's done really well, and it's based on West African mythology. The next prompt is Angry Mob, and this is read a book that was recommended to you by more than one person. And for this one, I'm going to go with Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. I read this one as part of a Green Ribbon Book Club, and this features anxiety representation. It also has depression and selective mutism representation. As you can see, I had like a lot... Oh no, can you see? Can you? I had a lot of thoughts like while I was reading this. The main character, Eliza, is a very, very, very popular webcomic creator, but she does all of this undercover. The people in her life don't really know how big it is. One day she meets somebody who's very quiet at school. She later finds out that he is like the biggest fan of her work. This book is just really sweet, and it has amazing anxiety and depression representation. I also really loved that it had little clips of her webcomics like throughout the book as well. The next three prompts are specifically based on the three teams of the Monsterathon. The first one is The Beast, and this is read a book that features a monster that has plant or animal qualities. For this one, I'm going to say Wilder Girls. This book features a boarding school. All the girls that live there started sprouting mutations, and it gets pretty much closed off, quarantined. And all their mutations are very plant or animal-like. No one quite knows what's going on, but it's very much a survivalist type book. It features a lot of body horror, so that's something to know going into it. It's been called a feminist Lord of the Flies. It does have sapphic elements to it. I didn't really see Lord of the Flies, but I did really enjoy the survivalist aspect of this, as well as the body horror. I didn't realize I would enjoy that so much in a book, but I did. The next prompt is The Haunts, and this is read a book featuring a monster that is dead or undead. This book is The Near Witch. In the town of Near, children start disappearing, and it just so happens to be the same time that a stranger shows up to the town. It's a very close-minded town. It's very cult-like. It's kind of freaky, but it also sort of has this timeless feel about it, so I don't really know like what time period it's supposed to be representing, but it does have sort of like an old closed-off town feel to it. The main character is not convinced that it's the stranger that is taking these children. Instead, she's convinced that it's the Near Witch. The Near Witch is someone who was killed by the town many, many, many years before, and the reason that it classifies is because the Near Witch herself is dead. Now, whether or not she is responsible is something that you find out along the way. And the last prompt is The Conspiracies, and this is read a book featuring robots, aliens, or any other conspiracy-esque type monster that you can't quite fit into other places. And for this one, I'm going to go with Sleeping Giants. This is the first of a trilogy by Sylvain Neuvel, and the trilogy itself is called The Themis Files. These books are told through a series of news reports, interviews, like journal entries, things like that. The first book starts off with a scientist who as a child fell into a hole and fell into a big robotic palm, and so she spends her life trying to piece together different pieces of a giant robot situation. And as they move forward, they start to think that possibly these parts are not from Earth, that they might be from somewhere else. And I freaking love aliens, so... If you decide to do this tag as well, please link your video below. Please share it on Twitter and tag us in it so we can share it with the world. We are all about trying to promote all the people that are taking place, so if you post about it, let us know and we will boost it. Because everyone needs recommendations for this readathon, and what better way to get them than to look at all the people that are already participating, so. And that's all for this video. If you would like more of this junk, subscribe below. Bye! Tripping over shadows and I'm drowning in the night. I feel the soldiers coming and I'm putting up a fight.